my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Owlet. Meet the Owlet Pregnancy Band, an at-home pregnancy monitor using innovative passive technology to give you peace of mind and the reassurance you crave through daily insights into your baby's well-being. You can listen to your baby's heartbeat, see baby's trends through the night and over several days, track mom's sleep position, and read weekly gestational updates about your pregnancy, all in the Owlet Pregnancy app. Right now, get exclusive access to the Owlet Band in its beta program and save $100. Get yours now before spots fill up at owletcare.com/band. At the end of this episode, I'll be talking to Jane all about the Owlet Pregnancy Band, so stay tuned for that conversation after today's birth story. Just a couple of quick announcements. Our Know Your Options online childbirth course is open for enrollment. You can get all the information for that at thebirthhour.com/course. And if you want to become a Birth Hour Patreon supporter, you can get that information at patreon.com/birthhour. We've had a ton of new patrons lately, and the Facebook group is just really blowing up with so much great support and friendship, and I just love seeing that group grow. So again, that's patreon.com/birthhour to become a patron of the Birth Hour, and we would love to get to know you in that group, and you can see all of the other perks that come with becoming a Patreon supporter when you head over to that link. Today's guest is Kara. She's going to share her experience being pregnant during medical school as well as the pandemic. She also talks about her induction and cesarean due to preeclampsia. All right, let's get to today's episode. Hi, Kara. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Hi, Bryn. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
All right. Can you start by telling listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Okay, so my name is Kara, and I'm 24. I'm married to my husband, George. He's 26, and we have an almost 1-year-old as of next week, and his name is Lucas. And we've been married for 2 years this year, and we live in a small suburb outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm about to start my 3rd year of medical school, and my husband is in IT.
All right, so let's start with finding out you were pregnant and how your pregnancy went.
So we found out we were pregnant. Actually, it was on my birthday. So we were kind of planning it for the most part. We got married in June of 2019, and we were kind of like, let's just throw caution to the wind and see what happens. But we kind of thought it wouldn't happen because it was so quick. But by September, that's when we conceived, and I found out in October that I was pregnant. So it was kind of a shock, but also like expected because we knew what we were doing. But
I can relate to that.
It's just like one of those things where you just don't think it's like going to happen when it does. So it was kind of a shock, but I told him like on my birthday. And then I think it was also a shock too, because we kind of had this really intense timeline. So if you're unfamiliar with like how medical school works, the first 2 years are what we call didactic or preclinical. So it's just all lecture-based work. And then the last 2 years are all rotation work where we're in a hospital. So we had this really strict timeline of like, we need to be pregnant by October or else we can't have a baby, because I had such limited time off between lectures and rotations. So I think we were also just not expecting to actually get pregnant in that it was like a 3-month period that we had set for ourselves. So it pretty much came easily. We got pregnant right when we wanted. We used ovulation tests. And then from there, the pregnancy was pretty much easy in the beginning.
All right. And then what type of birth were you planning?
We were planning just a regular hospital birth. I was so busy with med school that I didn't even like want to plan anything at that point. I was like, I'm just going to let it flow and see what happened. The only thing that I really was adamant about was like not wanting intervention, like no epidural, no induction, no cesarean, which is ironic because I ended up with all of those things. But other than that, I was totally okay with just doing like a hospital birth and calling it a day and, just moving on.
Were you in the hospital a lot for your med school?
So no. So since I was just starting first year, I took anatomy in the fall. So I had just found out I was pregnant in October. We started anatomy in November. So I was 9 weeks pregnant. And I still remember like the professor at the beginning was like, hey, if anyone here has like a health concern or is pregnant or anything like that, they need to come talk to me because we're going to be working with formalin and formaldehyde and we need to make sure you're going to be safe. And I remember sitting there thinking like, I don't know if I should like tell them. I really didn't want to tell my school. I was really nervous that they were going to think down on me. Like, you came to medical school just to get pregnant. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It was really terrifying, and especially because, medicine is still predominantly male. So there's not a lot of support for women in general, let alone a woman who's family planning in the middle of training. So I finally like built up the courage to go up to him and I'm like, oh, like I'm 9 weeks pregnant. And his eyes like got so big and he was like, oh my God. Like almost like he said, it's like his spiel. Like he said it at the beginning of every year, but he never really expected anyone to come up to him and be like, hey, I'm pregnant.
Right.
So they fitted me for this giant, like when I say massive, like it had 2 big like filters on each side and no one could hear anything I said. So I couldn't like contribute to dissecting at all. So I'd be like, guys, like we're going to cut over here. And they'd be like, what are you saying? Like, we can't hear you. And I had to have my OBGYN sign off on it, which he was pretty relaxed about it. He said there wasn't too many studies that said there were bad things that happened from being around really strong chemicals, which I was kind of shocked about because I was in my first trimester.
Yeah, and you always hear, like, not even to paint your house and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, like, I'm, like, there were points where I would get really freaked out because I'm leaning over. We had, like, this very frail older woman as our cadaver. And I'm leaning over her and my belly was getting bigger and it would be, like, in, like, a body cavity, just soaking in formaldehyde. And I was like, this cannot be healthy.
Yeah.
So just wearing the respirator mask, honestly, I was on my feet. Our anatomy labs would run. We would have like 4-hour like scheduled periods of lab. But then if you didn't finish your dissection, then you'd have to come back. So then you'd probably spend an additional 3-4 hours dissecting on your own time and then studying because we had practicals where you're going around and you're answering questions about these bodies. So it was a lot of time just on my feet with no sitting and also with no eating because every time you left the lab, you had to like take off your lab coat, take off the respirator, wash your hands, and then go find food and then come back and like do the same thing in reverse. So that was a challenge in the beginning of pregnancy when you're like nauseous and everybody tells you to keep eating. And I was like, well, I have these like 4 to 8 hour windows where I can't keep eating, which was really rough. And you also don't want to eat when you're kind of inhaling the smell of human. So
yeah. Did you have any tricks to like help you get through that?
I would keep like hard candies in my pocket. And then if I really needed it, I would just like sneak out and kind of just take my gloves off real quick and hand sanitize. I was the worst, like in the beginning of pregnancy. I think it's a miracle that he made it through. He was a tough little guy. But otherwise, I just kind of tried to not think about it. There was actually another woman in my class who was pregnant at the same time. And she had way worse nausea than I did. And I remember watching her like run in and out of class to like go throw up in the bathroom and then come back. So I'm thankful it was never that bad as long as I kind of just kept my mind off of it and kept my mind on like getting through the dissection and just getting out of there as fast as I could. Because as soon as you were finished your dissection, you got to leave and like go do whatever you wanted. So it was like, all right, if we finish this, then I can go sit down and like rest my feet and breathe.
Oh my gosh.
So the rest of the year though was all lecture. That was like our one hands-on class. And then the rest of it was just sitting in this big lecture hall that seats like 300 people and you're just listening to your professor go on for a few hours.
That's much better.
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no, because you have like pregnancy exhaustion. So I'm like half asleep most of the time. And the lectures, you know, sometimes they were 2 or 3 hours, depending. It was the beginning of pregnancy was just rough because of all the normal pregnancy things with like school on top of it.
Yeah. Well, I was in grad school when I was pregnant with my first, and I'm interested to hear how it was for you towards the end of your pregnancy, because I remember having to give a presentation and just like getting kicked in the cervix, like that lightning crotch thing. And I'm like, oh, trying to hold it together. But how did you feel later on in your pregnancy?
So I go to an osteopathic school. An MD is a doctor of allopathic medicine, and they are just your traditional physician. they do everything. They can be surgeons, primary care doctors, the right prescriptions, etc. And then DOs. So we do all that. We learn how to write prescriptions, and we can be surgeons and we can be primary care doctors, but we also learn osteopathy, which is basically learning how to use soft tissue or massage techniques, HVLA, which is what chiropractors use, and other forms of just like moving the body to return it to its natural state. So we will try and take a more holistic approach before we offer up prescriptions usually. So the whole basis of osteopathy is being holistic. So at our school, we have to take an OMM course, which is where you learn osteopathy. So you're basically practicing all these hands-on techniques with a partner once a week, and then we have practicals. So that was my one biggest concern as I got towards the end of my pregnancy was like, what am I going to do? How are they going to practice HVLA on me 9 months pregnant? Like, am I going to be allowed to be cracked? Like, are they going to be able, like, how am I going to lay on my belly if they need to like access part of my spine? So like that was actually one of my biggest concerns was how was I going to participate in this class, which is all about like moving your body in certain ways. But kind of luckily and unluckily, towards the end of my pregnancy, COVID hit in March. So I actually didn't go back to school. So the end of my pregnancy was completely home. I was home with my husband and we were both working from home. And the most exciting part of the end of my pregnancy was being diagnosed with preeclampsia and my whole family getting COVID at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the end of my pregnancy would have been uneventful. Except, like I said, right before actually, so I probably had preeclampsia for much longer than I knew it, but I wasn't allowed to go to the doctor to get checked because I had to keep calling. My dad got COVID first. And I'm like, hey, I called the doctor. I'm like, I think my dad has COVID. He's like, okay, well, you can't come in for 2 weeks. Then I called him again. I'm like, hey, my mom has COVID. Oh and then he's like, okay, well, now you can't come in for another week after that. And then I'm like, hey, my husband has COVID. And he's like, okay, well, you can't come in for another week after that. So I had missed 2 appointments in that time. And then by the time I went back, my blood pressure was like skyrocket. And I was like, oh no, it's just the stress of everybody having COVID. It's not any crazy.
How many weeks were you when you finally went back?
I was 31 weeks when I finally got to go back, and my blood pressure had gone up to, it was about 160/90 that day that I went. And I told my doctor, I'm like, it's white coat hypertension. And he's like, you can't have white coat. You're in a white coat all of the time. He's like, what do you mean it's white coat hypertension? And I'm like, no, I'm scared of doctors. It's the stress of being in school. It's the stress of coronavirus, like everything. And they send you home with that big pee jug, which if people aren't familiar, it's literally like this red, it looks like a biohazard like bin, and it's huge, and you have to fill it up with all your pee for 24 hours. And you also have to keep it in your refrigerator, which is so gross. And then they test it for protein, and that's basically what confirmed it. I think I was double the normal level of protein at that point at 31 weeks. And they diagnosed me with preeclampsia at 31 weeks.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So then 31 weeks is still really early. So what was the plan to manage it?
So they referred me to maternal fetal medicine at 32 weeks and basically had me meet with the high risk OB there. And he said it was so bizarre. Every time I would go to maternal fetal medicine, my blood pressure would be fairly normal. It would literally be like 140/80 or 130/80, which is still high, but normal for them. They were willing to accept it. So they couldn't figure out like how I had preeclampsia. They're like, this doesn't make sense. Why does your blood pressure go down? But either way, they said since it seemed like it was still fluctuating and not persistently staying high, they were comfortable with me staying pregnant until 37 weeks. And then as soon as I hit 37 weeks, it was going to be an automatic induction, which, like I said in the beginning, I really didn't want to be induced. I had really hoped this baby was going to come on his own. His due date was June 20th, and I was done school on June 5th. And so I was like, we planned this perfectly. He's going to come out sometime around June 20th. It's my first baby. They never come early. I'm not going to worry about it. He's obviously going to come after finals. And then 37 weeks put me at the week of finals. So I remember telling my high-risk OB, I'm like, I'm a med student. I can't have him at 37 weeks. And he was like, honey, this is preeclampsia.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter about finals. We're talking about life or death for you and your baby.
Yeah.
And in my brain, I knew it was serious, but I was also like, no, like, you don't understand. I have like 3 finals that week. Like, I cannot have this baby this week. How am I going to take finals after I have a baby? Like, we're talking med school finals. There's a lot of information per exam. How am I going to study? Like, and he's like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's school. You need to have this baby at 37 weeks.
That's hard to hear. And I guess just another good example of you can't plan when your baby arrives, because actually the same thing happened with me. We planned it for Christmas break for my first, and she was, of course, like 2 weeks late. So that whole thing went down the drain. But okay, so did you feel okay up to that induction point, or did you start to feel worse?
I think it was about 2 weeks later, 33 or 34 weeks. I think I was also hyper vigilant because they were like, if you have vision changes or right upper quadrant pain, like, call us immediately, like, you need to go in. But I think it was around 33 or 34 weeks, I just started feeling just unwell. That's when the swelling set in for me. So another sign of preeclampsia is like intense swelling. So my feet were huge. And again, in some ways, COVID was kind of like my saving grace because I never had to wear shoes because I couldn't go anywhere. But my hands started swelling, my feet were swelling. And then around 34 weeks, my blood pressure was consistently staying at 160/90. And my call-in number for the bottom was if it got to about 100. And I always knew if it got that high because I would start to feel so like sluggish. It's such a weird feeling to describe. Like, I don't even know how you describe it. It's not like you feel like your typical sickness. It's just, you just don't feel good. And sometimes I would get like a headache and then I would take my blood pressure and it was high. So then we'd have to rush to the hospital. But it was never anything that got to the severe point that I've like heard women talk about where, like I said, they're having vision changes or they're having these like terrible, like the worst headaches of their lives. But I started to feel like headaches and stuff when my blood pressure would get really high. And I started to feel just a general feeling of being unwell the later in my pregnancy that we got. And like I said, the swelling was just killer. Like, I tried so hard to keep my feet elevated to make them stop swelling, and nothing I was doing was helping at all.
So you at least knew when it was going to be. How did it start for you?
So leading up to it, we had decided we were going to wait until my doctor was going to be there, which was going to be Thursday, June 4th. But then my blood pressure got so bad, we actually scheduled it for May 30th. And so they told me everything they were going to be doing. They said, we're going to start you on Cytotec. And then once that ripens your cervix, then we're going to move on to Pitocin. And then you should have your baby within a day or two. Because I was 0 centimeters dilated. I was hardly effaced. Like, and they're like, oh, it'll only take a couple days though. Don't worry. So Sunday, May 31st, we went in at like 6:00 and they started me on Cytotec like right away. Got in, they put it in and they were like, yeah, you're still 0 centimeters, but we'll see where this gets you. So I got 2 doses of that and it really didn't get me much of anywhere. It got me to about 1 centimeter, but my uterus started contracting too much, so they couldn't give me another dose. And it was also really weird. I wasn't feeling any of the contractions they were saying that I was having. So they hooked me up to the monitor and you can kind of see the black line go up. And my husband was like, oh, look, I can see you're having another contraction. And I'm like, great, I can't feel them. And I don't think this is a good thing. Like, I think I should be feeling it opening everything up. So after the second dose of Cytotec, they started ramping up the Pitocin and they were like, don't worry, this is going to help get you the rest of the way. It's going to start opening your cervix. So they start me on the Pitocin and I'm freaking out because I've heard terrible things about Pitocin. I've heard like the contractions are so painful and there's no way you can give birth like without an epidural if you're on Pitocin because it's that painful. So they start me on it and I still wasn't feeling anything, like nothing at all. I don't know what the problem was, but I wasn't feeling anything. I wasn't feeling contractions. Like, I didn't feel pressure down there. Like, it just didn't feel like anything was going on. And so they just kept like ramping up my Pitocin. And then it got to a point where they're like, this isn't helping. You're still 1 centimeter. It was Monday afternoon. So we went in Sunday night. So it was Monday afternoon when they came back and they're like, this is not helping. Like, what can we do next? So they decided to start me on a Foley bulb, which I tell everyone, I do not recommend. I will not have again. I thought it was the most painful part of the entire labor. I have a pretty high pain tolerance, but I think because I was still only 1 centimeter, they brought in this doctor and she's like, I have the smallest fingers in the whole hospital. Like, I'm going to be able to get this Foley bulb in. Don't worry. And I'm like, okay. And she's literally like, do you see those extra small gloves over there? Those are for me because my fingers are so small.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm not sure if this is supposed to make me feel better, but it doesn't. So
weirding me out a little bit.
So they had her, and then it was another doctor plus a nurse who all came in, and they're like holding my legs open because they're like, this is really painful. Like, you're going to want to move, but you can't. And then they had actually another nurse come in who held my hand. And my husband, he's kind of squeamish. So like, he did not want to watch. He did not want any parts of it. He was so freaked out. So she's holding my hand and they're like, okay, we're going to start inserting it now. I swear it was like the worst pain I've ever felt. Like, it was like intense pressure and just like, it just felt like someone was like just too much pressure where it shouldn't have been. And she kept putting the bulb in too far. So when they tried to inflate it, it would go like past my cervix, like into my uterus. So they'd be like, oh no, it's not staying where it needs to stay. They deflate it, pull it back out, and then try again. So it took them like 3 or 4 tries to actually even get it in place to blow it up. And then that pressure of them expanding the balloon like in my cervix, that's when I started feeling like the worst contractions I felt the entire time. I told my husband, I was like, I feel like I'm dying right now. Like, I need something, but I wasn't far enough along to get an epidural. So the only choice was to get Dilaudid, which basically just makes you really sleepy. It didn't take away any of the pain. It just made me and the baby like pass out for several hours. And the worst part of that was having to use a bedpan. Like, that was a new experience for me. I've never been in the hospital. I didn't know how these things worked. So they gave me Dilaudid, and that just made me sleep through the worst of it. And then several hours later, so this was Monday afternoon, they left it in until Monday night. And they said it was supposed to take me until 4 centimeters, and I still wasn't at 4 centimeters. I think I made it to 3, and they just went ahead and took it out themselves, like manually, because they said it was supposed to fall out, and it never did. And around 3 centimeters, they came in and they broke my water. And the doctor was like, honey, like, this is gonna make you speed up. Like, once we break your water, it's gonna go so fast. Like, you're gonna be in labor, like, in 2 minutes, everything's gonna be good. You're gonna have this baby on Tuesday. So I'm like, okay, cool. We're breaking my water. We're moving along now. I'm getting really excited. So they broke my water, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm still going to try this without an epidural, because at this point I didn't have one yet. And the doctor was like, are you sure? Because the anesthesiologist is only going to be on this floor for a certain period of time. And if you don't get it now, you might miss out, and you might want it later, and then you can't get it. And then that started like playing over in my mind, like, oh my God, what if this gets worse? Then I do want one and I can't get it. So I went ahead and got the epidural. And it was fine. I was actually more freaked out about getting an epidural for the simple fact that it's this massive needle. More than anything else, I have a huge fear of needles. So I was just freaking out the entire time. Like, they're putting this needle in my back. What if something happens? What if what if something goes wrong and they hit my spinal cord? Like, all these random things that were probably not going to happen were just constantly in my mind, which is why I wanted to avoid the epidural. And I think that's also just part of being a med student is like, you know, way too much. And they're also teaching us all these random, rare things that never really happen, but we have to know them. So I got the epidural, which was actually really nice. I got to sleep, which I hadn't really done much of since we got there Sunday. And I slept, and they said I was contracting like every few minutes, and it was good. It was regular. They were strong. So they were really happy with like how things were progressing outwardly. So then I think it was Tuesday morning, they came in and they were like, well, let's check you again. And I was still I was 4 centimeters, barely. So I was 3 centimeters all of Monday. And then I had my water broken, and I was still only 4 on Tuesday. And at that point, I was like, I think this is not going to end the way that I had planned it. Like, I almost knew I was like, I'm going to need a C-section. But nobody had brought it up yet. nobody had like told me. They were just kind of like, we'll just let you keep laboring and we're going to get you a peanut ball to see if that can open up your pelvis. So they brought me this peanut ball, which I had never seen before. And you like put it between your legs. And because I had an epidural, I like couldn't move myself. So every 30 minutes they would come in and like flip me over. And I had this peanut ball for like 5 or 6 hours, just laying with it between my legs and being flipped every 30 minutes. And they came in and checked me again, like 5 hours after that. And they were like, you're still only 4 centimeters. Like every time they came in, I wanted to hear better news, but I knew it just wasn't going to happen. But at the same time, it was kind of nice. I busied myself in between with like studying because at this point I was going to give birth during finals week. Like I had contacted my school and told them that I was being induced, so I wouldn't be able to make finals. So my finals got moved to the week after. So this entire time in labor, especially because of COVID, no one could come visit. And it was just my husband and I was like, this is a perfect like 2-3 days to just study. I have nothing else to do other than sit here and wait for my cervix to open. So I kind of just used that time to study and keep myself busy with that. So they checked me again, like after being on the peanut ball for like 5-ish hours. They were like, you're still 4 centimeters. And I developed like a shake. Like I was profusely just like shaking like my whole body. And they were like, oh, well, it's like the labor shakes. Like, that's good. It means that your body is preparing. It's releasing all these good chemicals. Like, baby is coming. And I was like, I don't know, guys. Like, I feel like pretty cold. Like, I don't know if this is labor shakes. So the nurse comes back in and she's like, well, let's just take your temperature to make sure. And she like takes it. And I could just tell by the look on her face. She like was like, okay, hold on. And she runs outside and I hear her call the doctor's name. And I was like, oh my God. And she came back in with the doctor and the doctor was like, you have a really high fever. And I think at this point it was about 103. You might have chorioamnionitis, which is basically an infection of the sac that the baby sits in and your placenta. And they were like, we don't know for sure that that's what it is because we obviously can't get those results until after the baby's born. But most of the time when a woman has a fever in labor, it's typically due to an infection. And so at this point, they're like, we can let you keep laboring. It's your choice, but you might want to consider having a C-section. And at this point, my labor had been going on for 47 hours. I think we were up to 47 or 46. And I was like, at this point, I'm just so ready to like get this baby out. Like nothing's going the way that I planned it.
Yeah.
I was just so ready. So the doctor left and told me she was going to give me like a few minutes to think about it. And I just like broke down. I called my mom and I was like panicking. I was like, Mom, they're going to give me a C-section and I'm going to die on the table. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I don't know. I have a bad feeling about it. For some reason, I just feel like, I don't know. There's just so many risks. It's a surgery. She's like, Kara, you're going to be fine. Take a deep breath. Like my mom had 4 C-sections and she's like, it was never a problem. You will be okay. And I think what had really freaked me out too was that the doctor had mentioned, and I think this again was her knowing I was a medical student. She really didn't sugarcoat things or kind of simplify things for me. She spoke to me as if I was an equal. And so she's like, you know, you had all this Pitocin, and what the Pitocin does is it overwhelms receptors in your uterus. And what that means is that when we get this baby out, your body is going to release oxytocin, which is what Pitocin replaces in a synthetic form. And she was like, because those receptors were so overwhelmed, your uterus might not respond to oxytocin, which means it might not clamp down. So she was like, so you're at a higher risk for hemorrhage. So we're going to look out for that. And I'm like, at this point thinking, I'm going to hemorrhage and I'm going to die, like right on the table. And my mom's like, Kara, I think you're going to be okay. Relax. So they got my husband all like dressed up in his, I guess it's like the surgical gown with the scrub cap and the like shoe covers. And the nurse came in and she felt so bad for me. She had been there with me for a while. She didn't even go home for a shift change. She was so invested in how my pregnancy was going to go that she stayed with me from like that morning until that night. And so she's like holding my hand and I'm crying. So then she started crying and she's like, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. The baby's going to be fine. Like you're like, everything's going to go fine. So they like wheel you into the OR and I started like freaking out. Like your husband can't be with you or your partner can't be with you for the beginning part of when they're setting up for a C-section. So it's like super cold. You're in there by yourself. I'm just looking at all the surgical instruments. I'm like, oh my God, like this is it. Like I just started panicking and they're like, you're going to be fine. Don't worry. So the anesthesiologist was like, we're going to just increase your epidural so that we don't have to place anything else. We're just going to give you more epidural. And that made me panic even more. I was like, no, I don't want just an epidural. Like I can still feel my toes. And they were like, you definitely cannot feel your toes. And I was like, no, I can still feel my toes. Please give me something stronger. So they were like, okay, we'll just do a full spinal block then. So they like pull out the epidural and they prepare to do a spinal block, which they explained to me. So the epidural only numbs you from like your mid back down, but a spinal block numbs you from kind of like your shoulders down. Like it'll make your arms feel weak, but it goes up to a higher level to numb your body down. So they were like, one of the side effects of having the epidural and the spinal block is that it can make you have this feeling that you can't breathe because it's putting like a lot of pressure on your diaphragm, I guess, because you're basically numbing it twice. So your diaphragm kind of gets a little weak. So they were like, there's just this side effect. It might happen. It might not. But if it does, don't worry. It's very short lasting. It'll go away really quickly. So I was like, okay. And like, I should have known I was going to have this happen to me at that moment because my labor, like I said, was not going according to plan. And I also forgot to mention when I got my epidural, they also explained the side effects and they were like, yeah, one of the side effects is like a quick drop in blood pressure, but like, don't worry, you should be fine. And they monitored me for 15 minutes and nothing happened. My blood pressure was stable. And then as soon as the nurse left, my blood pressure tanked down to like 80/40 and I started getting really nauseous. And they called her back in. They had to give me ephedrine to bring everything back up because it started dropping so low. So at this point, I really should have known that if they mentioned a side effect, it was most likely going to happen to me. So they like lay you down and they strapped my arms on the sides of the table and they brought my husband in and they're like, can you still breathe? Like, do you feel comfortable? I'm like, yeah, like I feel fine. Like, can't feel anything. This is great. Like, let's get this baby out. Like, I'm ready. And then like 30 seconds must have gone by and I was like, guys, I can't breathe. Oh my God, I can't breathe. And I just started freaking out again. I was like, guys, I cannot breathe. I cannot take a deep breath. Like I need to sit up. And they were like, you can't sit up. We've already cleaned the area. I was like, no, I need to sit up. Because if I sit up, I feel like I can expand my lungs more. And they were like, no, this is just the side effect we talked about. Like, this is normal. It's going to pass. Don't worry about it. And the surgeon, I remember seeing her come in and I literally like almost lunged off the table and I was like about to grab her and she's like, oh my God, I'm sterile. And I was like, I know, but like, I need to sit up. And she's like, you can't sit up. Like, you need to kind of calm down or else they're gonna like knock you out completely. Because at this point I was really causing a commotion. So I kind of laid back because I was really scared that I wasn't gonna be able to see my son be born. So I laid back and they gave me an oxygen mask and they were like, don't worry, we're watching your oxygen. You're still breathing, even though it feels like you're not. You're still breathing. Just stop talking. Stop wasting breath. Just take slow inhales through your nose and like slow exhales through your mouth. So I was like, okay. So it felt like it was really bizarre. Like, the whole thing felt like 10 minutes, even though I know that it wasn't. So I think we went into the OR around 5 o'clock, like 4:45, 5 o'clock, and he was born at 5:26. And I heard him just like scream as soon as they pulled him out. And like at that moment, I think I felt so much relief. I was just in and out. I think my husband said I was like either falling asleep or just zoning out. Like the whole thing felt like such a blur at that moment. Like, at one point, everything was black. Like I felt like I wasn't there. And then all of a sudden I turned around and there was like a baby next to me. And he was born totally healthy. They had an entire NICU team in the room because he was being induced early and because of the possible infection. So we had so many people in the OR with us. And they were like, oh no, he's good. He's great. Like he was having a little trouble breathing when they first pulled him out. So they told me that from like across the room. But then they were like, oh no, he's fine. It'll regulate in a few minutes. And he was literally just like perfect. Like everything I had gone through at that point was 100% worth it because he was just like this perfect little bundle. Like, and they stitched me up. They sent me back to the recovery room, and I'm sitting there holding him. And I look at my husband and I'm like, I'm ready for another one. And he was like, oh my God. He's like, you're kidding, right? I'm like, no, that was so exhilarating. Let's do it again.
Oh my gosh.
I think I was still just like high on the whole experience.
Yeah.
And like that was pretty much my labor story. He was born after 47 and a half hours of laboring and not progressing. And then they did confirm after I gave birth that I did have chorioamnionitis. So I was in the hospital for 3 days after that for the C-section anyway, but I also needed 3 days of IV antibiotics. And then also they were monitoring my blood pressure the entire time because most women, usually it'll go back down. Mine did not. It stayed at like 140/90.
So after those 3 days, was there more like follow-up once you got home, or how did your blood pressure do longer term?
So we got home that Friday, and I'm always kind of like blaming external features in my life. I'm like, my blood pressure is not going down because I have finals coming up.
Yeah, finals with your 1-week-old baby. Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, that's why my blood pressure is not going down. So Sunday, I do remember I was like telling my husband, I'm like, I just don't feel good. Like something doesn't feel right. And we took my blood pressure and it was 170/100. And I was like, let me call my doctor. This doesn't feel right. Like I need to make sure that I'm okay. And my doctor's like, it's probably fine. Why don't you go give the baby to someone else, go take a nap for a couple hours and like wake up and then retest and like see if it's still okay. So I like did what he said. I like took a nap for a couple hours, which was really hard for me to do because like I said, at this point I was cramming for finals because I managed to study for the part that I was laboring, but I did not study after he was born. I was too busy staring at him. So I'm like, I'm missing out a couple hours, whatever. So I did end up taking a nap. I woke up and my blood pressure went up. It went up to like 180/, it was 115. And at this point I'm just sobbing because I was so tired of my blood pressure just not being where it should have been. I was just exhausted. I had a new baby. Like I said, I had exams coming up, and then I was just exhausted of like this whole back and forth of, is my blood pressure going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to have a stroke? Because that's always what you're worried about, is your blood pressure gets so high that you end up having a stroke. So I called the doctor back and they're like, okay, like you need to come in, but you can't bring anyone with you. You can't bring the baby. You can't bring like your husband. And they were like, if you're pumping or anything or you're breastfeeding, like we'll supply a pump, but you might need to stay here overnight. And I like lost it. I was like, I can't leave my baby with my husband overnight because he doesn't hear the baby when he cries. I was like, I can't leave him for an entire night. Like I have to feed him. Who's going to feed him? He's not going to take a bottle. And my husband was like, don't worry, the baby's going to be fine. Like, go to the hospital. You need to like focus on you. We have him here. Like my parents were there. My brother was there. So they're like, we have him. Don't worry. And I went to the hospital and they managed to get my blood pressure to come back down to 140/90, but it was still spiking occasionally to like 160/100. So they were like, let's just go ahead and give you labetalol, which is just a blood pressure medication. So they started me on 200 milligrams of that per day and told me to follow up with my doctor like 2 days later. And I followed up and my blood pressure just was not going down. So I ended up on 400 milligrams. And then the following week, I had another follow up and it still wasn't going down. So then I ended up on 800 milligrams and they were like, we're going to see if this helps. Like they were hoping it did because otherwise they were going to have to put me on a second blood pressure medication. And if they have to do that, it's a lot harder to get you off of the blood pressure medication. And they were also kind of thinking at this point it might be a chronic thing, which I was scared about because I'm only 24. I don't want to be on blood pressure medication for the rest of my life. And then by the 3rd week postpartum, 800 milligrams of labetalol had helped. And it brought me down to like a normal, like 115/75. And so I just stayed on labetalol for 12 weeks postpartum and they monitored me. I think my doctor had me call him every 2 weeks after that. And then by 8 weeks, my blood pressure was like kind of normalizing. It was getting kind of lower, like 100/60. So he started weaning me at that point. And then it was pretty much fine. Like it still kind of spikes here and there, but nothing as crazy as it was after I gave birth or during pregnancy. So I've been able to not take anything for it since 12 weeks postpartum, which has been nice.
That's good. So anything else from postpartum that you want to share about other than trying to get yourself back to health?
One thing I didn't really know after you have a C-section, actually, there were lots of things I did not know after you have a C-section.
Please share.
One thing, I guess I knew it, but like I didn't realize even after a C-section that you still bleed a ton. Like that was news to me. Like I thought, I was like, oh, I got off scot-free. Like I'm going to bleed for like a day. It's going to be fine. But like, no, you still bleed a ton. So that was shocking to me. Another thing that was really shocking was I would get these like burning sensations like across my pelvis, and like I had no idea what they were. Apparently they were like nerves trying to connect. I kept thinking I had some sort of infection or something, but I would get, every time I stood or I walked, I would get a shooting like burning pain on like one side of my incision. I didn't know that was going to happen. And I also had no idea that I was going to completely lose sensation across my incision. Like even months down the line, I still don't have the sensation back. So like I can pinch my incision and like not feel it. So I thought that it was kind of going to come back eventually, and it really didn't, which you kind of just get used to it. But it was annoying at first, being like, I can't feel this part of my body. That's very weird.
Yeah, I've heard of some like massage techniques and stuff like that that can help. It might be worth looking into. I don't have personal experience.
Yeah, I did talk to someone who showed me like you should try and loosen up the scar tissue by like spreading your incision and moving it side to side and kind of just making sure that you don't get a ton of scar tissue buildup. So I started trying to do that around 3 or 4 months postpartum. But I don't know if anybody else who's had a C-section feels like this or if it was just me, but like I felt so weird about touching my incision at first.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Like I kept touching it and I'm like, I don't know. It just feels weird. I don't know. I kept thinking like, what if it like splits open even after it was healed, which was totally not going to happen. But I'm like, what if it splits open or like something happens? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it can be weird touching your vagina after giving birth too. Like even months after, you're like, what am I going to find? Like it's all so different. But yeah, I know there's like emotional attachment there as well for both.
Yeah, I think that was also part of it too. I felt after I gave birth, I would have like frequent flashbacks to like when they told me I needed the C-section or when they were prepping me, like just that moment of laying there and like I just felt so helpless, or just like that moment of like just intense fear. Like I had so much fear going into it. So like I think there was a bit of an emotional attachment too. And one thing that I had always heard about, like through listening to your podcast or talking to other women that gave birth who didn't have the birth that they wanted, like they kind of mourned the birth that they didn't have. And I didn't think I'd be like that because I was like, you know, I'm a med student. I know that things happen and that I'm totally okay with medical intervention. Like I am here for whatever they need to do. So I thought I'd be fine. And I think after giving it a lot of thought postpartum, like I really wasn't as fine as I thought I was. I was really like mourning the fact that I did not get this like birth that I really wanted. I didn't get to try without interventions, or I didn't get to let my baby come on his own. So I think that was really hard to kind of work through and then accept postpartum.
Yeah, I think that is, like you said, we hear that on the birth hour all the time. So all right, were there any resources that were helpful to you throughout pregnancy or postpartum?
My only resource was your podcast. Like the day I found out I was pregnant, I would listen to 2, 3, like 4 episodes.
That's awesome.
It would take me an hour to get to school. So I would listen to like 1 in the morning or like 2 short ones and then like 2 in the afternoon. And it was honestly perfect. Like after I found out I was diagnosed with preeclampsia, I just went in and started searching for like all the shows you had in the archives and all the shows that are on like Apple Podcasts or whatever that had preeclampsia or like inductions. And I just started listening to like all of them. Like I was like, I need to know everybody's experiences.
That's good though, that was helpful to you.
It was really helpful. The one thing I regret not doing was the birth class that you guys offered, but I was so...
You had a lot going on.
Yeah, I was so preoccupied with COVID going on at the time. Like I said, everything was shutting down. Like we had a birth class in person planned, and then that got canceled because of COVID. And then after that, I was like, I need to find another one. And then I didn't, because I was so overwhelmed between like March and June with everything going on. But that's the one regret that I have, that I didn't use that as a resource.
Well, since you're so eager to have another baby, it'll still be there when you're ready. Has that changed at all? Do you still feel like you want to have another one soon?
Well, it depends. When my baby is sleeping, I'm like...
Yeah, right. When they look like perfect little angels.
Yes. I'm like, I want 10 more babies right now. And then now he's walking and grabbing everything. And then as soon as that happens, I'm like, I can't have more than one. He's a handful. So we'll see what happens. Like, I have to see where the rest of med school takes me and the rest of residency takes me.
Yeah, my husband was showing me videos of our youngest when he was probably like 2 months old, like cooing at me and stuff. And I was like, are you trying to give me baby fever? Like, what are you doing?
Every time I see someone have a newborn and you just hear the newborn sounds.
Yeah, it's so cute.
That's what gets me. Like the little, oh gosh, I know. And then I'm always...
Yeah, that's biological.
Then I'm like, let's throw caution to the wind. I don't care about finances or school or work or anything else. Like, let's just do it. And my husband's like, oh, maybe not.
Maybe not. Well, thank you for sharing and thank you for listening to the podcast. And what's the best place for people to reach out to you?
So people can find me on my Instagram, and my handle is my first and last name. So it's Cara, Cara. Grudziak, Grudziak, and then it's got 3 underscores after my last name, and it's all one word. That's probably the best place. I'm also on Facebook, but I tend to kind of stick more to Instagram, and my profile is public. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can. I usually try and respond within like a few hours.
All right. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing, Cara.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, now I'm going to talk to Jane all about the Owlet Pregnancy Band. And don't forget, you can head over to owletcare.com/band to join their beta program and save $100 right now. All right, let's hear from Jane. Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for coming on the Birth Hour today to talk to me about Owlet. I'm so excited to have you here. You guys have a new product out that we're going to hear all about, but can you just introduce yourself first and tell us a little bit about your role at Owlet?
Yeah. So as you said, my name is Jane, and I am, first and foremost, I'm a mom to 3 amazing kids. They're 9, 7, and 1. And I'm also a team member over at Owlet. We're best known for the Smart Sock baby monitor, which I have used with 2 of my kids. And as you mentioned, we're here to share more about a new product.
All right. So tell us about this new product.
It's called the Owlet Pregnancy Band. And it's an at-home pregnancy monitor that gives you the peace of mind and the reassurance you crave when you're expecting. And it does this through daily insights into your baby's well-being. I'm really excited about this product. It's a wellness device. It's not a medical device. And it's really intended to give you that deeper connection with your baby, providing insights and additional information during, the last part of pregnancy from 24 weeks on.
Very cool. So this is a very new product, nothing else out there like it. So I'm sure you guys are trying to just kind of really clear up confusion and explain what exactly it does. So can you talk a little bit about how this is different from other things out there, like say a Doppler or other monitoring devices?
Yeah, so I'd really say that it's a first of its kind invention in that the Owlet Pregnancy Band, it's all about that deeper awareness and deeper connection between mom and her baby. I was able to test it in the early days when I was expecting my youngest, and I can definitely relate to, just wanting to connect and be in touch with your baby. And that's what the band does. It is built with passive technology that provides a safer way to check in on your growing baby and also, track things like you as mom, your own sleep position and your heartbeat trends. And so how it's different from a Doppler is a Doppler has high frequency waves that are emitted or that enter into the body, whereas the Owlet Pregnancy Band has sensors. We'll have a picture, I think, on your Instagram, but if you look at it, it's really just it's soft, comfy fabric that goes around your belly. And in that fabric, sensors are woven in. What's different here is they're passively collecting that information versus emitting high frequency waves into the body.
Okay, so it's something that you can use on a daily basis and you're wearing it while you sleep, right?
Yeah. So right now it's designed for expectant mothers who are 24 to 40 weeks pregnant while carrying a single baby, and you wear it at night. So you just put the band on at night. You wake up in the morning and you get a wellness report of how the night went. So you'll be able to see your sleep position. You'll be able to see mom and baby's heartbeat trends. You'll also get, to hear a recording of the heartbeat, which I just think is so cool. And if needed, you might be prompted to do a manual kick count, which, sleep position is really important for a healthy pregnancy, as well as doing those kick counts as well. So really, the band is about supporting a healthy pregnancy and, again, empowering you to develop that deeper awareness and connection, both with your own body as well as with your baby before they, join you in your arms.
And it's connecting to an app on your phone and giving you those reports there, right?
Yeah, there's an Owlet pregnancy app that you will be able to view that. Right now, it's available for iOS devices only. In the app, you'll get all of the things we just talked about, as well as weekly content on where you're at in your pregnancy journey, what gestational week you're at, all of that. So it's really everything you need all in one. And for me, it's really exciting to just have it literally in the palm of your hand.
So you mentioned the Owlet sock earlier, which you guys are really well known for. And how is this different as far as live readings versus the report you're getting in the morning?
Yeah, so you're right. The Smart Sock is going to give you live readings throughout the night. And again, there is the Owlet Care app that has that. The pregnancy band, which right now is in beta, and I can talk more about that in a little bit, is different in that you'll put it on at night, you'll go to sleep, and then you wake up to the report. It's not that you're going to be getting live insights throughout the night. It's that morning report that you can look forward to.
Which is good because you don't want anything interrupting your sleep when you're pregnant. Sleep can be hard enough, right?
Exactly. I think, we all just want to get the best sleep we can. And I truly think the insights you're going to get from the report every morning can hopefully help us as moms, better understand that and maybe hopefully get a little bit better sleep.
Definitely. All right. So you mentioned that it's in beta right now. What exactly does that mean for my listeners?
Right now, the Owlet Pregnancy Band is currently in beta, meaning it's still under development. But right now we have an opportunity for a limited number of expectant parents to join our beta program where you will get the band. You will get access to the Owlet Pregnancy app, and you can start using it, starting at week 24. And right now through the beta program, we are offering $100 off. We have so many moms already using it. And that's why I wanted to come speak with you about here's what the product is. Here's how it works. Here's why I love it. And for anybody out there who is expecting, here's how you can get it right now in our beta program. It is limited in the number of spots, but as of right now, we do have some open spots, and I'm excited for, more parents to join.
Very cool. And where do people go for that?
Head on over to owletcare.com/band.
All right, so we will be sure to link to that from the show notes page. And I just had a couple other questions. First of all, how does the sizing work? Is it adjustable or does it come in different sizes?
It's a soft, breathable fabric band, and it is adjustable, designed to grow with you throughout your pregnancy from 24 weeks on, as well as coming in different sizes. So it ranges from size extra small to 3XL so that we can help accommodate more expectant moms and, they can get the band and it can grow with them.
I love that because any product that I've tried to buy during pregnancy that you want to wear for like second trimester through third trimester, it's so hard to judge the size your belly will be. So that's really nice that it's adjustable and easy to make it work throughout pregnancy. All right. And then I saw on your website that it's FSA and HSA approved. So could people potentially use their HSA account to pay for it?
Absolutely. So it's the same with our Smart Sock and now with the pregnancy band. If you have HSA, FSA dollars, perhaps from your employer or through your health insurance plan, you can use those funds toward the purchase of the Owlet Pregnancy Band, including through the beta program.
Amazing. All right. And again, everybody can just go to owletcare.com/band to find all of this information, and we will link to it from the show notes page. Thank you so much, Jane, for coming on today and sharing with me about this awesome new product from Owlet.
Thanks.
Thank you so much again to Kara for sharing her birth story with us and to Owlet for sponsoring this episode. If you want more information about the Owlet Pregnancy Band, that link again is owletcare.com/band. And I'll be sure to link to that from today's show notes page as well, where you can get all the other information from today's episode, including how to connect with Kara on Instagram. And all of that is at thebirthhour.com, and just search for Kara's name in the search bar.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.